Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this episode, we're gonna do a little bit of jerkbait fishing. We're here in Arkansas. The water temp is like 55 to 58 degrees. It's a little bit warm for a jerkbait bite, but I know we can catch them today. I really like to fish a jerkbait like this. This is the Berkley Stunna. Not associated with Berkley at all. Just think it's a great jerkbait. And you know, I really like to fish a jerkbait when the water temps kind of rise into that 50-degree range. You know, anything below 50, you can still catch them on a jerkbait, but I really find that you know, 50 to 55-degree range is kind of the hot spot for me. And then above that, you can definitely fish a jerkbait until they start spawning. And you can even fish a jerkbait all year round, really. But on this video today, I just wanted to kind of show you guys how I retrieve a jerkbait, you know, the cadences that I use with the jerkbait, because that's very, very important when fishing this specific type of bait, because really you're responsible for imparting the correct action on any given day. So that's what we're going to talk about today. It is an awesome technique that I love to throw. All right, so let's real quick run through the tackle here. You know, today I'm fishing casting gear, so bait casting setup. But right now it's been going on for a long time. There's been a debate whether you should use casting gear for jerkbaits or spinning gear. And I'm starting to really see the light as far as like fishing a spinning setup with a jerkbait, because it's easier on your wrist, and I feel like you can impart a different action to it. And you can use lighter line as well. Well, I mean, you could use light line with your casting rod, but there are definitely some good arguments for fishing spinning gear. But today we're using casting gear. We're using a 7.2 to 1 gear ratio reel. We're using a 7.3 medium action casting rod. I used to fish like a 6.6, so a much shorter rod back in the day for my jerkbaits, but I found that I was hitting the side of the boat a lot, and I feel like just being 6'2", a 7.3 rod tends to work a lot better for me, and I can take out slack out of the line really quick if the fish hits and comes at me. So I've got a lot more leverage and ability to get slack out of the line. As far as the line that I'm using, this is really important. I'm using Seaguar and Vizex. So the reason why I like Seaguar and Vizex over other fluorocarbon lines, and Tatsu is also a really good one, but Vizex is probably the one I use the most for my jerkbaits, is the fact that you want the maximum amount of action out of your jerkbait. And especially when it's really, really cold, fluorocarbon, most fluorocarbons, especially inexpensive fluorocarbons, they are usually really stiff and wiry, and that I feel like can cut down on the ability of this bait to move, you know, in a wide arc, you know, have a lot of action to it. So Vizex is made to be very soft, supple, low memory. It works great on spinning reels, but I like it for jerkbaits and other baits like crankbaits that need a lot of range of motion to get the right action, because it's softer. And especially when it's really cold out, it still allows that bait to have good action. So that is the setup. All of the products that I'm using today, I'm gonna have links in the description below. But other than that, let's get started. Let's go fishing. All right, so the very first thing that we have to discuss is the basics of fishing a jerkbait and getting the right action out of a jerkbait. And the right action is different on every single day, but in general, you're wanting to get the most side-to-side movement out of your jerkbait. So the most erratic, you know, wide swing to your jerkbait. That's not always the case. Like there's been some times where just like, you know, pulling the bait and having a very narrow like movement is really good. But I'd say most of the time I'm looking to get like a wide side-to-side action. And the way that you get that side-to-side action is to have a little bit of slack in your line in between the pops of the rod tip or the jerks of the rod tip, okay? And putting slack back in that line, that semi-slack. And when I say semi-slack, I'm talking about like having just a little bow in my line on the rest. So when the rod is not moving, you're not imparting the jerking action, you've got a little bow in your line, okay? And then you do reel in some slack, but the amount of slack that you reel in between each pop of the rod tip is just enough to get that semi-slack, you know, bow in your line. And essentially, to get that wide action, to achieve that, you have to, number one, reel it down to the depth. That's the first key. So, you know, crank it, just a few cranks to get the jerkbait down to depth. Oh, dang it. That was a bite right there. You reel it down to depth, okay? And then you've got semi-slack, you got that little bow in your line, and you pop the rod tip to, dang it, that was another bite right there. We got some fish here. But you're popping the rod tip, you're popping the slack out of the line, and then bringing your rod tip back to where you're like pointing at the bait. And you've, once again, got that little bow in your line. So you're popping that slack out of the line, just like that. Good example. Got it right in the snoot. Right in the snoot. Oh, man, don't move, don't move, don't move, don't move. Oh, I gotta tell you, messing with jerkbait fish, he ate it good. He ate it good. Messing with unhooking and grabbing jerkbait fish is pretty scary. All right, so that is the biggest key that you've got to remember, is how to achieve that real erratic action. So it's just all about using your rod tip to pop that semi-slack out of the line, and then immediately, you know, allow that slack to get put back in the line. And of course, you're reeling in the excess. All right, so that achieves that signature action of a jerkbait. Now let's talk about cadence, because cadence is probably the most important factor when it comes to the action that you want to impart on that bait on a day-to-day basis. Now, a jerkbait, the great thing about a jerkbait is that it is so customizable as far as the way that you fish it. There's no wrong way in a year's time to fish a jerkbait. But every single day and every minute of the day, there could be wrong ways to fish a jerkbait. You know, there's some days that you might be wanting to fish a jerkbait really fast, but the fish want it extremely, excruciatingly slow. So big, long pauses. So really, the balance that you want to find with a jerkbait and you want to be aware of is the ratio of rod tip pops or jerks with the rod tip, so the action of the bait, and the pauses, okay? And I think that the pause length is one of the most important parts. Now, I wish I could tell you that when I fish a jerkbait, under certain circumstances, I'm like, all right, I'm reeling it down and popping it twice and letting it sit for 5 seconds. And then I pop it once, let it sit for 4 seconds. I wish I could tell you the exact formula for the cadence that you want to fish to catch fish, but really it changes. And honestly, I don't even like keep count. Like, I just do what feels right for that day, but I pay attention to how long the pauses need to be. And sometimes there is no pauses. Sometimes I'm casting out there, especially with smallmouth, and I'm just constantly moving that bait. I'm not slowing it down at all. Okay, so there are times when pauses are, you know, are non-existent in the action of the bait. But in general, especially the times that I like to fish a jerkbait, early season, cold water, it's really important to pay attention to how long the pauses are when you're getting bites, okay? So there's a lot of times this is kind of the action or the cadence that I'll start out with, is like 2 or 3, maybe 4 second pauses. And, you know, a couple jerks or 1 jerk in between. All right. But there are times when I'll let that sucker sit for like 10 seconds. Okay. And I think what a lot of the times is happening, and the reason why pauses are so important to pay attention to, is the simple fact that a fish is engaged with that bait. They notice the bait because of the erratic action that it has, okay? Initially, that's kind of the first draw. So they start following a bait. you know, and they don't necessarily strike it right away. But if they're following the bait and then all of a sudden it stops right in front of their face, instead of bumping right into that bait, they just open their mouth and eat it. And that's kind of, I think, what happens a lot of times. And a lot of times, you know, I don't think that it's that reaction that's really making the difference. It just may be that it's imitating a dying shad. So the instances where a fish hits at 8 seconds on a 10-second pause, obviously it's not like running into the bait. It's just interested in eating it because they think it's, you know, dying. One thing I will mention is that there is a way that you can really get a crazy reaction bite out of fish that are following, and that's by changing the way the bait is moving, or, you know, just changing it just a little bit so it moves in a different way. And to achieve that, one of the best ways to do that is to, instead of popping the rod tip down, which we're doing the most of the time, is to occasionally pop the rod tip up so that jerkbait pops up, you know, and it seems like it's trying to get away from the bass. That is a really good way to get a follower to strike that bait. So every once in a while, when I'm fishing a jerkbait, you know, I'm gonna be doing the regular retrieve, but then I'll just go ahead and pop it up real quick. And a lot of times that gets a vicious strike out of those fish. All right, so like a general rule, if I was to give you a general rule as far as like, you know, the length of pauses that you want to use on any given day, I'd have to say that if the water is colder or dirtier, you want longer pauses in between the pops of the rod tip, the jerking action. And if it's warmer or clearer water, that's when the pauses get a little bit shorter. So that's a general rule. Colder or lower visibility situations, longer pauses. Clearer water, maybe sunny, calm conditions, you know, that's when you want to use a shorter pause, or no pause at all. Just keep the bait moving. So that's kind of a general rule for you. All right, guys, so that does it for today. You know, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. You learned something about fishing jerkbaits. Jerkbaits are one of those type of lure categories that I think is just highly underestimated for the entire year, but is definitely a key player during like the colder months of the year, the pre-spawn, things like that. But it's the great thing about it is it's so easy to kind of put your own little twist on working a jerkbait. So anyways, guys, let me know if you have any questions or comments. Drop a comment below. If you enjoy this content, consider hitting that subscribe button. That is a great way to support the channel and to show me that you want more content. So thank you guys very much. I'm gonna see you out on the water. Use those affiliate links in the description below and trust the process.